Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I never saw it coming. Not at first. When you've been with someone for so long, you don't question the little things. The quick glances of irritation, the sighs when you speak, the sharpness in their voice that wasn't always there. I told myself Lindsay was just stressed, that her art career was taking up too much of her time, and I needed to be patient. But patience doesn't fix something that's already broken. And I was about to learn just how shattered we had become. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. A marriage of unequal sacrifice. Lindsay and I met when we were young, before life had weighed us down. She was all passion and ambition, a painter with dreams bigger than our small-town world. I was practical, steady, the kind of man who built things with his hands. When she wanted to move to the city, I said yes. When she needed time to focus on her art, I picked up the extra shifts. I never complained, because I believed in her, because I thought she believed in me too. But lately, the things I did for her weren't enough. The daily insults, "You smell like sawdust," she muttered one evening as I walked through the door, tossing her phone onto the couch. I glanced at my hands, still rough from the day's work. "It's called hard work." She scoffed. "It's called being stuck." "I'll let slide. I always let slide." Then came the comparisons. "I was at a gallery today," she said one night over dinner, poking at her salad with disinterest. "Met this collector who just gets art. He travels to Milan, Paris, all these places. Meanwhile, I'm stuck here with a guy who spends his day pouring concrete." My jaw tightened, but I didn't respond. Was I supposed to say that I was working overtime so she could keep chasing a dream that hadn't paid our rent in months? That everything I did was to support her, and she still looked at me like I was an anchor dragging her down? I swallowed the words, but they stayed there, lodged in my throat. The family gathering that broke me the night everything changed. We were at her parents' house for a dinner party. Her family was upper class, the type who sipped wine and discussed stocks. I had never fit in, but I tried. I always tried. Lindsay, however, seemed to thrive on making me look small. "So, Matt," her father said, swirling his drink, "how's the construction business?" Before I could answer, Lindsay laughed. "Oh, Dad, come on," she said, waving a hand. "Matt doesn't run the company. He just works the job sites. You know, manual labor." The table chuckled politely. My hands curled into fists under the table. She wasn't done. "Honestly, it's kind of cute," she continued. "Like a Hallmark movie. Me, the struggling artist, and him, the rugged blue-collar husband." Someone made a joke about flannel shirts. Someone else added a comment about sticking with what you know. The laughter was light, casual, but it cut me deeper than any wound ever had. I looked at Lindsay, at the smirk on her lips as she sipped her wine. She didn't even notice what she had done, what she had been doing for months. The worst part? I let her, but not anymore. I didn't say anything that night. Not at her parents' house, not on the car ride home. I let her sip her wine, laugh with her mother, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. But something had shifted. I felt it deep in my gut. I had swallowed every insult, every offhand remark that chipped away at my dignity, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But sitting at that dinner table, being laughed at like a sideshow act, I realized something. Lindsay didn't respect me. She hadn't for a long time. And that meant our marriage was already broken. The next time it happened, I wasn't going to sit there and take it. A week later, we were at a friend's birthday party, a cozy gathering in a high-rise loft that overlooked the city. It was Lindsay's world, full of gallery owners, photographers, and art critics who talked in circles, pretending to understand paintings that looked like someone spilled coffee on a canvas. I wasn't an idiot. I knew I didn't belong here. But I played my role, the supportive husband standing beside his brilliant wife, nodding along while she discussed color theory and postmodern influences. Then came the moment that pushed me over the edge. We were standing in a small group, glasses of champagne in hand, when one of Lindsay's friends, a woman named Claire, turned to me with an exaggerated smile. "Matt, you've been so quiet. Tell us, what's it like being married to a genius?" Before I could respond, Lindsay laughed. "Oh, come on, Claire, let's not pretend. Matt's not exactly an art guy." Someone chuckled. My face remained neutral. Lindsay wasn't done. I mean, his idea of creativity is deciding whether to use nails or screws on a job site. Laughter erupted. I froze. My fingers curled around the glass, gripping it tightly. I looked at Lindsay, waiting for her to realize how cruel she sounded. But she didn't. She just kept smirking, basking in the attention, completely oblivious to what she had just done. "Careful, Lindsay," I said, my voice level. "Wouldn't want people thinking you actually respect the man paying for your studio." The laughter died instantly. Lindsay blinked. "What?" I turned to Claire, who was still watching me with that amused expression. "Yeah, that little downtown loft where Lindsay paints all day, the one she loves bragging about." I took a sip of my drink, letting the silence drag. "She doesn't pay a dime for it. That's me. Every month." Lindsay stiffened. The mood in the group shifted, uncomfortable glances being exchanged. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was trying to flip the conversation back in her favor. "Well, of course, Matt works hard," she said, forcing a laugh. "That's what I love about him." I cut her off. "Lindsay, tell me something." She frowned. "What?" I tilted my head. "When was the last time you said, 'Thank you for anything I do'?" The group was dead silent. Lindsay's face darkened. "Matt, don't be dramatic." "Not dramatic," I said, my voice calm. "Just wondering." She huffed. "You're acting ridiculous." I turned to Claire, shrugging. "Guess that answers my question." Lindsay's mouth opened, then shut. Her face flushed red, her usual confidence cracking under the weight of the moment. I let it sink in. Then, without another word, I set my glass down and walked away, leaving her standing there, humiliated for the first time in her perfect little life. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the party. Not on the car ride home, either. Fine by me. For once, I actually felt like I had won something. But later that night, as I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, that moment at the party kept replaying in my mind. I should have felt better. I didn't, because deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Her insults weren't just about power. They were about justifying something. Something she didn't want me to see, and I was finally starting to piece it together. I spent the next few days watching Lindsay. Really watching. Not the way I used to, where I brushed things off and told myself she was just having a bad day. This time, I paid attention. The way she clutched her phone tighter than usual. How she angled the screen away from me, her fingers moving quickly to delete messages before I got close. The late night, art meetings that never used to exist. And then there was the box. I found it while cleaning. It was wedged behind some old canvases in her studio, tucked away where she thought I'd never bother looking. A sleek, black gift box, far too elegant to be something she'd buy for herself. Curious, I lifted the lid. Inside was a gold watch, the kind that screamed money. Not just expensive, exclusive. I turned it over, my stomach nodding as I saw the engraving on the back. For JP. Every masterpiece deserves a patron. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at the words. My mind scrambled for explanations for something that didn't mean what I already knew it did. Yotpe. The initials meant nothing to me, but the implications did. Someone had given her this. And not just anyone, someone important. Someone who thought himself a patron to her art. Someone who wasn't me. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I closed the box, my hands tightening around the edges as I exhaled, slow and controlled. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Because I didn't have proof. Not real proof. And I wasn't the kind of man to swing blindly. If Lindsay was cheating, I wasn't going to confront her like a fool, giving her the chance to lie her way out of it. No, I was going to make sure there was nowhere for her to run. That night, I tested her. She was at the kitchen counter, sipping wine, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. "Hey," I said casually, leaning against the fridge. "Got a question?" She hummed, barely looking up. "Who's JP?" Her reaction was small, just the slightest pause, a tiny flicker of hesitation before she answered. "What?" I watched her. "JP ring a bell?" She shook her head, laughing lightly. "Should it?" There it was. The lie. Smooth. Immediate. No hesitation now. I let the silence stretch, studying her. She wasn't nervous. Not in the way a guilty person should be. That meant she didn't think I knew anything. Good. I pushed off the fridge. Just curious. Thought I heard the name somewhere. She smirked, returning to her phone. Maybe from one of my galleries. You don't exactly keep up with the art world. I nodded, smiling to myself as I walked out. She had no idea that everything had just changed. Over the next few days, I put together every missing piece. Lindsay thought she was smart, but she had gotten comfortable. And comfortable people get sloppy. A search through our shared credit card statements showed charges to five-star restaurants I had never stepped foot in. Jewelry stores, hotels, things that had no explanation beyond the one I had been avoiding. And then came the final proof. I found the article late one night, buried in the back pages of an art industry blog. It was about high-end galleries, about the ways artists secure opportunities beyond just their talent. I might have scrolled past it if not for the headline. When art and influence mix, the secret deals that keep certain names on the walls. And there, nestled halfway down the page, was her name, Lindsay Williams, a rising talent who had gained the personal favor of a renowned art dealer named Julian Parker. JP, there it was, the missing piece. I clicked the link attached to his name, my hands tense as his face loaded on the screen. He was older than me, sharply dressed, the kind of man who lived in penthouse suites and drank whiskey that cost more than my truck. And he was the man who had been funding Lindsay's success. I sat back, the weight of it finally sinking in. She wasn't just cheating. She was selling herself to get ahead. I closed the laptop, staring at the dark screen. My reflection stared back, but I didn't recognize the man looking at me. He wasn't heartbroken. He wasn't even surprised anymore. He was furious. Not the kind of anger that makes you lash out. The kind that waits. The kind that plans. Lindsay thought she had control. That was about to change. I spent the next few days carefully laying the groundwork. There was no room for mistakes, no second chances. If I was going to destroy Lindsay, I needed undeniable proof. I had seen men in my position confront their wives too soon, let emotions get the better of them, only to be met with manipulation, gaslighting, and rehearsed lies. Not me. I wasn't giving Lindsay a single opening. First, I took care of the watch. The moment she wasn't home, I returned to her studio, retrieved the black box, and swapped the real gift for a cheap imitation. A knockoff I ordered overnight, nearly identical in appearance, but worthless. The engraving? I had it replicated at a small shop downtown, right down to the last detail. The difference was that this one would break apart within days. She'd never noticed the switch until it was too late. And by then, Julian Parker would know exactly what kind of woman he had been investing in. Next, I needed to track her movements. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, small, discreet, linked directly to my phone. If she went anywhere she shouldn't be, I'd know. But that wasn't enough. I had to see it for myself. The opportunity came faster than I expected. That evening, as she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with surgical precision, I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Going somewhere, she smirked at her reflection, not even glancing at me. Meeting some investors. Big night. Investors. That was a new one. I nodded. Where? She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before flipping her hair over her shoulder. Just dinner downtown. Nothing exciting. I kept my expression unreadable. Sounds important. She turned to face me, her eyes scanning mine, searching for anything. Doubt, suspicion, anger. I gave her nothing. Finally, she exhaled, reaching for her purse. I won't be too late. Of course, I said smoothly. Enjoy your meeting. She hesitated again, as if something fell off. Then she smiled and walked out the door. I waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing my keys and following. The tracker led me to an upscale restaurant near the waterfront. Not the kind of place where business deals were made, but where affairs were nurtured under dim lighting and expensive wine. I parked across the street, heart steady, pulse controlled. If she was really meeting an investor, I'd find out soon enough. I didn't have to wait long. Through the large glass windows, I saw her glide inside, her dress clinging to her like she knew exactly who she was trying to impress. And then, Julian Parker. He was already seated at a corner booth, a bottle of champagne chilling beside him. He stood as she approached, placing a hand at the small of her back, pulling her close, whispering something into her ear. She laughed. Not the kind of laugh she ever gave me anymore. I clenched my jaw, forcing my hands to relax against the steering wheel. I needed to be careful, calculated. Then I saw it, the moment that would seal her fate. She reached into her purse, pulled out the watch, and placed it in his hands. He turned it over, smiling at the engraving. My engraving. It was almost poetic. I raised my phone, zoomed in, and snapped the photo that would destroy her life. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the evidence in front of me. The photos, the credit card statements, the article exposing the corrupt art world Lindsay had crawled into. Everything was airtight. She thought she had power, thought she had control, but she had built her success on lies and stolen moments, and now I was going to tear it all down. But I wasn't finished yet. One final move, one final piece of the puzzle. I sent an anonymous tip to an art journalist known for exposing scandals. Not a full confession, just enough to make them dig, enough to plant the right questions in their minds. Enough to ensure that when the time came, Lindsay wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose everything, and she wouldn't even see it coming. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome in my mind. Lindsay had no idea what was coming. That was the only thought that kept me calm. By morning, I had already set my plan in motion. The journalist I had tipped off had responded quicker than I expected, asking for more details. I gave just enough to keep them hungry. A few hints about high-profile deals and artists willing to trade more than their paintings for a chance at fame. I attached the article where Lindsay's name was already mentioned. That was enough. Once a journalist sensed blood in the water, they'd do the rest of the work for me. Lindsay went about her morning routine as if nothing had changed. She sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that the floor beneath her was already cracking. I watched her carefully, waiting for a sign that she had received any warning, but she remained oblivious. Maybe Julian hadn't checked the watch yet. Maybe he hadn't realized he was holding a worthless fake. Maybe, just maybe, my timing was perfect. She glanced up at me. "You're quiet today." I smirked. "Just thinking." She smiled, leaning back in her chair. "About what?" I took a sip of my coffee, holding her gaze. "You'll find out soon enough." Her expression flickered with something. Curiosity? Suspicion? I didn't care. The trap was already closing. That night, Lindsay had another event. A huge one. A gallery opening showcasing some of her best work. Julian would be there, along with the art community's most influential buyers and critics. It was supposed to be the night she cemented her place in the industry. Instead, it would be the night she lost everything. I arrived at the gallery early, blending into the crowd, making sure I wasn't seen. The room was filled with elegant people in designer suits and cocktail dresses, sipping wine and nodding thoughtfully at paintings they pretended to understand. Lindsay moved through them like she belonged, laughing at the right jokes, touching the right arms. But then I saw him. Julian. He was standing near the back, looking furious. I watched as he pulled Lindsay aside, gripping her elbow just a little too tightly. I couldn't hear them over the chatter, but I could see it in her face, confusion, then panic. He held up the watch, turning it over in his hands, showing her the engraving. She shook her head, trying to explain, but Julian wasn't having it. He stepped back, looked her up and down like she was something cheap, then walked away. I grinned. That was just the opening act. The main event came when the gallery owner took the stage, preparing to announce the auction of Lindsay's most expensive piece. The crowd gathered closer, eager to see which collector would make the final bid. Lindsay stood beside the stage, trying to compose herself, clearly shaken from her conversation with Julian. Then, just as the bidding began, I stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the room. The auctioneer stopped mid-sentence, confused. Heads turned. Lindsay's eyes widened as she finally saw me. "Before you spend a fortune on these paintings, there's something you should know about the artist." The silence was instant. Lindsay didn't just sell her art. I continued, my voice smooth and calm. She sold herself. A murmur spread through the crowd. I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the gallery's projector before Lindsay could stop me. And then I played the slideshow. Text messages. Photos. The article naming Julian Parker. Screenshots of credit card charges linked to places no struggling artist should have been able to afford. The final image? A picture of her hand placing the watch into Julian's palm, the engraving visible to everyone in the room. The gasps were audible. Lindsay's face drained of color. "Matt," she whispered, stepping toward me. "Please don't do this." I tilted my head. "Why? Because now they know the truth?" She reached for my arm, desperation in her eyes. "We can fix this." I stepped back, out of her reach. "No, Lindsay. You did this. You lied. You used me. You used him. And now, you're finally paying for it." The gallery owner was already whispering with his assistant. A woman near the front turned to her husband. "I'm retracting my bid," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Another man followed. Then another. Within seconds, Lindsay's career crumbled right in front of her. Julian was gone. The buyers were leaving. The gallery owner took a deep breath, then turned to Lindsay. "I think we should pull your exhibition from the collection." Lindsay let out a shaky breath, eyes darting around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one did. I watched as she finally understood. She had nothing left. And I walked out the door without looking back. I drove home in silence, the city lights flashing past me. I should have felt relief, maybe even satisfaction, but all I felt was emptiness. Lindsay was done, her career in ruins, her lies exposed. There was nothing left for her to manipulate, no more excuses to twist, no one left to fool. I had done exactly what I set out to do, destroy her. But as I pulled into the driveway, the weight of it all settled in. This was real. My marriage wasn't just broken, it was over. Not in the slow, decaying way I'd felt it slipping through my fingers these past few months, but in a final, undeniable way. I wasn't walking back into a home. I was walking back into a place filled with memories of a woman I no longer recognized. I pushed open the door, stepping inside, the quiet pressing in around me. The house still smelled like her perfume, like the candles she always burned in the evenings. Her jacket was draped over the chair, her shoes kicked off near the doorway, like she was coming back. She wasn't, or at least, she shouldn't have been. But an hour later, the front door flew open, and there she was. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared, her dress wrinkled like she had been pulling at it in frustration. She slammed the door shut behind her, her breathing uneven. What the hell was that? I didn't look up from my drink. I swirled the whiskey in my glass. That was the truth. Her heels clicked against the floor as she stormed toward me. "You humiliated me, Matt. You ruined me." I let out a short laugh, finally meeting her eyes. "You ruined yourself, Lindsay." She stared at me, her hands clenched into fists. "I was building something. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I set my glass down, standing slowly, taking my time. She flinched slightly, but held her ground. "What I've done," I repeated, stepping closer. "You mean what you did? You lied. You cheated. You sold yourself to get ahead. And when I finally gave you the consequences you deserved, now you want to act like the victim?" Her lip quivered, but she clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay defiant. "It wasn't like that." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "So tell me, Lindsay, what was it like? Explain to me how meeting a man in secret, accepting his gifts, letting him fund your career was anything but exactly what it looks like." She exhaled sharply, her hands moving to her temples like she was trying to steady herself. "I didn't love him." I laughed again, shaking my head. "That's supposed to make it better? You didn't love him, so what? That makes it less disgusting." She stepped forward, grabbing my arm. "Matt, please. We can fix this." I ripped my arm away. "There is no we anymore." Her breath hitched, like she hadn't fully accepted it until I said it out loud. "You're just going to throw everything away?" I let out a slow breath. "You threw it away. A long time ago." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had spent months making me feel like I was nothing. Now, it was her turn to feel it. She shook her head, backing up slightly. "You're making a mistake." I gave her a look so cold it made her physically recoil. "The only mistake I made was loving you." Silence stretched between us. For the first time in years, she had nothing to say. I grabbed my keys from the counter, walking toward the door. She stepped forward like she was going to stop me, but she didn't. She just stood there, watching me leave. I paused at the doorway, looking back at her one last time. I'll have the divorce papers sent to you. And then I walked out, shutting the door on her, on us, on everything we used to be. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old paper. The kind of place where marriages came to die, where people signed away years of their lives with a flick of a pen. I sat in the heavy chair across from my attorney, a man who had probably seen this scenario 1,000 times before. But for me, this wasn't just another case. This was my life unraveling in real time. Lindsay hadn't responded to my texts about the divorce, which didn't surprise me. She wasn't the type to face things head on when she wasn't in control. She would try to drag this out, make it painful, maybe even play the victim. But I wasn't letting her dictate the pace of this war. You have everything you need? I asked, tapping my fingers against the desk. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s, nodded. The evidence you provided is airtight. Infidelity cases don't always sway the court in terms of asset division. But in this case, with the financial transactions, the gifts, and the nature of her relationship with Parker, he slid the documents toward me. You'll come out on top. I picked up the papers, scanning the legal jargon. My house, my savings, my assets. She was entitled to nothing but whatever dignity she had left, if she could find any. I signed the papers in quick strokes, the ink drying like a death certificate for my marriage. How long before she gets served? I asked. By tomorrow, he said. She won't have much time to prepare. Good. By evening, I was back at the house, waiting for the storm to arrive. It didn't take long. Lindsay burst through the door, her face red, clutching the divorce papers in her shaking hands. What the hell is this? I didn't even look up from my drink. Looks like divorce papers. She stomped toward me, slamming them onto the coffee table. You're really doing this? Just like that? I finally met her eyes, calm and steady. Just like that. She let out a hollow laugh, pacing in front of me. Unbelievable. After everything. You're just going to cut me out like I never mattered? You didn't, I said bluntly. She flinched, her mask slipping for a second before she scowled. You're punishing me. That's what this is. You wanted to humiliate me, and now you want to leave me with nothing? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. No, Lindsay, you did that to yourself. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to sell yourself to some rich art dealer like your dignity was just another piece on the auction block. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. Matt, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. We can work something out. We don't have to do this like enemies. I tilted my head. Like enemies? I let out a short laugh. Lindsay, you became my enemy the second you decided I wasn't enough for you. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. You're so damn cold, she spat. You think you're better than me now? I stood, towering over her. I've always been better than you. I just didn't see it before. She let out a shaky breath, looking away. I'll fight this, she murmured. You're not going to leave me with nothing. I smirked. Try me. She stormed toward the door, but hesitated before opening it. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I shrugged. I regret ever loving you. But this? I gestured toward the papers. This is the easiest decision I've ever made. She stared at me for a moment longer, her lips parted like she wanted to say something else. But in the end, she just walked out, slamming the door behind her. I let out a slow breath, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The house was quieter now. Not in an empty way, not in a lonely way, in a clean way. Like the air had finally been cleared of something rotten. Lindsay's things were gone. Her perfume no longer clung to the furniture, and the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I had expected some part of me to miss her, to feel an ache in the absence of her presence. But I didn't. What I missed wasn't her. It was the version of her I thought existed. The woman who once laughed at my dumb jokes, who used to kiss my cheek while I made breakfast, who made me believe she actually saw me as her partner, not her stepping stone. That woman had disappeared long ago. The divorce was in motion, and Lindsay had stopped trying to reach me. After the initial threats, the empty promises of reconciliation, the desperate attempts to negotiate, she had gone quiet. I knew why. She was losing. She had built her success on manipulation, on favors, on carefully crafted illusions. But once I had torn that down, she had nothing left to stand on. Galleries pulled away from her, Her name was whispered in disgust. And Julian Parker? He had moved on, probably finding another desperate artist to play with. The last I heard, he had rescinded all financial support, which meant Lindsay was now exactly where she feared the most. On her own, with nothing. I should have felt satisfaction. Maybe some part of me did. But mostly, I just wanted to move forward. Rebuilding my life was easier than I thought it would be. I found a new apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but mine. The kind of place where I could breathe, where I wasn't surrounded by memories of betrayal. My job was steady, my savings intact, and for the first time in years, I wasn't working myself into the ground for someone else's dreams. I finally had the chance to focus on what I wanted. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I started seeing someone new. Her name was Claire. She was nothing like Lindsay. No pretentious attitude, no superiority complex, no hidden motives. Just real, honest, and sharp as hell. We had met through mutual friends, and at first, I kept my distance. I wasn't looking to jump into anything, not after what I had just clawed my way out of. But Claire was patient, never pushing, just meeting me where I was. And before I knew it, I found myself actually enjoying life again. One night, as we sat on my balcony, a bottle of wine between us, she gave me a curious look. "You never talk about her," she said. I knew who she meant. I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "Because she doesn't matter." Claire studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good," she said simply, clinking her glass against mine. And just like that, I knew I was finally free. I heard about Lindsay again a few weeks later. Not from her. She had disappeared from my life completely, but from a passing conversation at a coffee shop. A couple of people were whispering near me, their voices low, but just loud enough for me to catch. "Did you hear about Lindsay Williams?" "Yeah, her last gallery deal fell through. No one wants to work with her now. Guess karma finally caught up with her." I didn't react. I just finished my coffee and walked out. I didn't need to hear the details. I already knew how it ended. She had destroyed herself, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. The thing about karma is that it doesn't always strike like lightning. Sometimes it's slow and merciless, like a tide that erodes everything until there's nothing left. That's what happened to Lindsay. After the gallery scandal, she tried to claw her way back. I heard bits and pieces from mutual acquaintances, people who still followed the train wreck out of morbid curiosity. She tried to paint herself as a victim, claiming she had been set up, that I had manipulated the situation, that her success threatened the fragile ego of a bitter ex. But no one bought it. The art world was all about reputation, and hers was beyond saving. Julian Parker dropped her completely. He wasn't the kind of man to attach himself to a sinking ship. The patrons who had once gushed about her work turned their backs. She reached out to old friends, but people suddenly weren't so eager to return her calls. She had spent years using people, and now there was no one left to use. Then came a financial fallout. She had built her life on connections, on favors, on men like Julian funding her career. Without them, she was just another struggling artist with expensive taste and no real plan. She tried selling her paintings, but buyers didn't want them anymore. Her once praised work was now tainted, her name a warning sign in high-end circles. Galleries didn't want to be associated with her. Investors backed out. She lost her apartment first. I wasn't sure where she went after that. Probably couch surfing, burning through whatever friendships she had left until they, too, abandoned her. I should have felt pity. I didn't. One evening, months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Lindsay herself. I was at a bar downtown, meeting a few old friends, when I saw her near the entrance. She looked different. The confidence she once carried, the unshakable arrogance that made her believe she was untouchable, was gone. Her hair was a little messy, her makeup smudged, and there was a dullness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She saw me and froze. For a second, I thought she might turn around and leave. But then she squared her shoulders and walked toward me, trying to rebuild the person she used to be. "Matt," she said, forcing a small smile. I took a sip of my drink, keeping my expression unreadable. "Lindsay." She hesitated, shifting on her feet like she was unsure how to approach me now. "How have you been?" I gave her a slow once-over. Better than you, apparently. A flicker of something crossed her face. Shame, maybe, but she covered it quickly. Yeah, well, life's been complicated. I raised an eyebrow. That's what we're calling it. She exhaled sharply, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. Look, I didn't come over to fight. I want to talk. I leaned back against the bar, watching her. Talk. She licked her lips, glancing down before meeting my eyes again. I made mistakes. I let the silence stretch, waiting to see where she was going with this. I shouldn't have done what I did, she continued, her voice quieter now. I took you for granted. I got caught up in everything, and I lost sight of what really mattered. I tilted my head. And what really mattered? She swallowed hard. You. I laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not even a bitter one, just pure disbelief. Me? I repeated. Lindsay, you didn't lose sight of me. You threw me away. There's a difference. She winced, but I didn't stop. You didn't cheat on me because you were caught up in everything. You did it because you thought you were better than me. You looked at me like I was holding you back when I was the only one keeping you afloat. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, but I didn't care. I didn't appreciate you, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. I thought I needed more. I was wrong. I let the words settle, then shrugged. Yeah, you were. She looked at me like she wanted to say more, like she was about to beg for another chance. But she must have seen the truth in my face, the absolute certainty that I was done with her forever. So instead, she just nodded, blinking back tears. Take care, Matt. You too, I said, meaning none of it. I watched as she walked out of the bar, smaller than she had ever been, fading into the city lights. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing at all. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.